So good evening, and I'd like to thank UAF Summer Sessions and Foundation of Health Partners for sponsoring tonight's talk. Just a little bit of housekeeping. The smoke does, I've got this cough thing going on. I'm going to use cough drops and water periodically. So again, my name is Dr. Clay Triplehorn, board certified in sleep medicine and family medicine. And so tonight's lecture, when we were thinking about doing topics on sleep, one topic that came to mind was the current use of technologies and various technologies that are out there to potentially improve sleep. I'm sure all of you are on the internet and get emails and Facebook and all, and you probably have been marketed to with various technologies or melatonin products. So there's a lot out there, and but it's hard to sort through what's real, what's not, what's magic, and what's not. And so tonight, what I thought I would do is kind of bring forward what I'm using in clinic in a kind of a very informal conversational, like what I'm doing in clinic and what's working from my perspective, and maybe some talk a little bit about what's maybe we might be seeing in the future in terms of sleep and improving sleep over time. So I'd like to start the talk just to pay homage to evolution and where things have come from, and with respect to our brains and sleep. So sleep is a very, very complicated process. We spend a third of our lives sleeping, and very few of us are aware of how complex and deep are the processes which where it occurs just as a sleep. And there's really two processes that have evolved over the last several thousand years in human evolution, which help us sleep. The first is a wakefulness pathway, and that is a pathway that maintains our alertness during the daytime. And there's many nuclei there's not one nucleus in the brain that promotes sleep. There are multiple nuclei throughout the spinal cord and the cervical spinal cord and the brain that actually promote wakefulness during the daytime. To oppose that, at nighttime, there's also another group of nuclei that actually suppress wakefulness and actually promote sleep. And so one of the nuclei, for example, is the TMN nuclei, and for example, that uses histamine as to actually promote wakefulness. So when you take an antihistamine, for example, the normal wakeful promoting aspect of the histamine compound is suppressed. So that's what causes sedation when you take Benadryl or NyQuil or ZQuil or one of those medications. So there's this very intricate set of nuclei, a large number of neurotransmitters, and there's this very dynamic interplay that takes place to keep us awake and alert during the daytime, but also to help us sleep at nighttime. And it's just an amazing process how this has evolved. So what the sleep nuclei create is it actually slows the brain down to rest. And so here, this is an awake neurotransmitter pattern. And basically, it's this fine kind of buzz that you see. And then as you go through stage 1, 2, and 3, and at this stage 4 sleep, as you see these stages of sleep, you can see, even into the untrained eye, that you can see that the waveforms are getting larger and they're larger amplitude. And this is the slowing of brain. And as you drop into these lower stages of sleep, these are the stages of sleep that actually are physically relaxing and actually give you that physical sense of being refreshed in the morning. Up here, you'll see stage REM. And you'll see that stage REM is really close to the wakefulness. And if you look closely, they're very similar in what they appear. And it turns out that stage REM, even though it's a deep stage of sleep, it's very similar to wake. And if you look at the activity of the brain, wakefulness and REM sleep are almost exactly the same. The brain is very, very busy in REM sleep. And it's processing memories, it's pruning, it's recategorizing what it's learned during the day, memories, And the REM sleep is a very, very busy process at nighttime, and that's why we put stage REM here. So at night, typically you go through a series of 90-minute cycles, and the cycles, stage 1, 2, 3, 4 sleep, and then REM, and then every 90 minutes. So if you look on the right here, this is actually called a hypnogram, and this actually looks at how we typically stage or step through sleep each night. So stage 1, 2, 3, REM, the second stage, third stage, and then here's the last stage of sleep just before you wake up. And you can see in the yellow here, this is stage REM. And as you get into stage REM, the REM periods get longer as the night goes on. So the first part of the night is really the physically most refreshing part of the night, the time that you physically get refreshed. And then the latter part of the night is when when the brain actually processes and actually becomes mentally more refreshed, if you will, right? So where this comes to bear on a clinical setting is if we think about anxiety or depression. It turns out the time that the brain actually sorts out conflict and stress and trying to problem solve is in this last part of the night right here. And if you short that for somebody, so if they're working shift work or you're getting up early to go to high school or something like that, if you short that, there's a huge jump in anxiety levels and also incident depression as well if you short that period of sleep, or if there's something fragmenting the sleep. So it's a very intricate process that takes place at nighttime while we sleep. Again, the hypnogram, you can see the different cycles. We're talking about the different stages of sleep in this slide. And basically, so in terms of experientially, stage 1 sleep is like a light doze. You can be technically sleeping, and this is very light, lightly aware of your surroundings. And then as you drop into sleep, you get more relaxed. There's a drop in body temperature. Your sense of awareness of your external environment decreases. And then once you drop into stage 3 sleep, you actually get very relaxed. And then you get into stage REM sleep, and that's when you're maximally relaxed, but that's when the highest brain activity is taking place. And you actually need, so some people say, well, am I getting enough REM sleep? Am I getting enough stage 2 sleep, stage 3 sleep? There's this focus on especially stage REM. And it turns out all stages of sleep are important. It's the whole package that actually gives you the best experience. So by the way, this evening, if we have questions, this is like a conversational thing, so yeah.
Coming out of sleep, does it reverse, or does it go from sleep to suddenly wake?
Sorry?
Does it, coming out of sleep, do you go from sleep to stage 3, stage 2, stage 1?
No, it's not like a dimmer switch. It actually, so from any of the stages, the question is, does the reverse happen? As you fall asleep, you go stage 1, 2, 3, REM. And is the reverse happen when you wake up, you go REM 3, 2, 1? And so basically, out of any of these stages, you can be suddenly awakened up. So you can jump the stage wake or wakefulness out of any of these stages. Okay?
But I mean, under normal sleep conditions.
Oh, and yeah, normal sleep conditions. So basically, it's the pattern I just shared with you. It's stage 1, 2, 3, REM wake. There's a little brief wakening, and then stage 1, 2, 3, and it just repeats that way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Oh, great question. So dreaming primarily occurs in stage REM, so the REM sleep. In fact, this latter stage of, this is the last REM stage, is the one you remember when you wake up in the morning. So when you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh, that was a nice dream, bagels at Lulu's or something like that, then that's the stage of it. It is also true that you can dream in non-REM sleep. So the ratio is about 80-20. So 80% REM sleep, 20% non-REM. And then there are some circumstances. So for example, in people who take antidepressants, for example, well, antidepressants for the most part suppress stage REM. So you would think like, well, those people dream, and they do. And so it doesn't seem to impact, it doesn't shut off all dreaming. It's just an interesting kind of thing. So in terms of sleep deprivation and cognitive performance, I like this slide a lot because it uses functional MRI. And basically, with functional MRI, basically you take a glucose molecule and you label it with a radioisotope. And so what that lets you do is let you look at metabolic activity anywhere in the body. So if you wanted to know, like, if you wanted to give somebody like painful experience, like stick them with a fork, and then actually see what part of the brain that actually impacts. So what you do is you inject the radio-labeled material, stick the person with the fork, and then you'll see the area of the brain that's most active with the fork experience, where that area lights up. Okay? So these functional MRI scans are looking at somebody who is awake on the upper scan, and you can see lots of brain activity of varying amounts in multiple locations. And then when somebody is very sleep deprived, you can see how the activity of the brain is very severely depressed. And pretty much across the board, most areas of the brain is affected by sleep deprivation. And I think that's just an awesome slide for that reason. So sleep deprivation, cognitive performance, we discussed this in previous talks, but we'll just hit it again. So how our cognitive performance is very tightly linked to how we're sleeping. And so everything from mood, so somebody who's sleep deprived, irritability, difficulty controlling moods, you'll get impulsive or compulsive behavior, decreased motivation, cognitive inflexibility. Your ability to think outside the box is impaired if you're sleep deprived. Diminished retention of newly learned motor skills, learning and integration of new information, moral decision making is also impaired. So police officers or army soldiers that are sleep deprived and they're in combat and they're trying to make quick decisions on who to shoot and who not, you can make the wrong decision as a result of sleep deprivation. And there's a number of both military and law enforcement studies that show actually impairment in ethical decision making. Frequent lapses in accuracy. Again, we talked about anxiety. Pain threshold is also increased. So somebody who has a chronic pain condition, if they're not sleeping well for any reason, typically pain levels are much higher. Obviously prone to accidental injury. And if you're extremely sleep deprived, what'll happen is the brain is going to be rather insistent on you sleeping, and it will start intruding with visual hallucinations, dreaming, if you will, into the daytime experience. So you'll be sitting in the room and there's a gopher in the corner, or you'll hear these people talking, but you're in the room by yourself. And so basically what that is the sleep-deprived state, the brain is becoming more insistent that you sleep, and so it'll start intruding dream phenomena into the wakefulness. Sleep deprivation also significantly improves or alters our metabolic state. So acute sleep deprivation actually increases our rate. We'll burn more calories if we're acutely sleep deprived. But if you're chronically sleep deprived because of sleep apnea or shift work or staying up at night watching Netflix, the chronic sleep deprived state actually depresses your metabolic rate substantially. You can also get big drops and changes in your growth hormone levels. Two hormones of recent interest have to do with our appetite and weight loss or weight gain. These are both leptin and ghrelin. Leptin is the hormone that's produced by your fat cells. And basically, it's the hormone that tells your brain that you have enough body stores on board, you don't need to eat more. And then ghrelin is the hormone that's produced by the stomach that tells your brain that your stomach is full. When you are sleep deprived, the leptin trigger is turned off. So the brain has no way to know that you have enough body stores on board, and you'll keep packing on the weight. Good example of that is a lot of guys that finish up at Fort Wainwright. They leave the military, they eyeball Fort Knox gold mine, and they pay well and great benefits and a terrible shift work schedule. Those guys, on average, the rotating shift work is pretty aggressive, and most of those guys, at least by my view, are averaging about 5.5 to 6 hours of sleep per night, or at a 24-hour cycle. I didn't think it was possible for somebody to gain 60 pounds in like 6 to 8 months, but it can happen, and I've seen it a couple times. And no other changes in really habits. I mean, still working out, eating healthy, but it's just the change in the shift work actually can seriously drive weight gain. Insulin sensitivity can also be affected. So if you're pre-diabetic or diabetic, and then also cortisol levels are much higher. Sleep deprivation can also change athletic or physical performance greatly. Big drops in cardiac output, decreased muscle memory and coordination. So for example, if you decided to learn how to skateboard, and tonight's the night, if you're caught up on sleep, your ability to learn the skill is actually going to be way better than if you're sleep deprived. Your ability to learn how to dribble a basketball or ride a skateboard or do some sort of manual task is very impaired if you're sleep deprived. Decreased muscle strength, decreased reaction time, decreased accuracy, decreased and time for recovery is increased, and increased time for that you'll become exhausted. So this is an example why almost every professional football, basketball, hockey team has a cadre of sleep physicians working with the athletes. Those are all big dollar sports. If you're having an off evening because you went from New York to Los Angeles or vice versa, it's not just an inconvenience, it's expensive. So in terms of sleep requirements, our sleep requirements are really a derivative, and it's basically the cost of having the brain the size that we do. So our ability to speak, our ability to think logically, our ability to problem solve has to do with a very large cerebral cortex. And to support that, the sleep is the cost. And so that is why, for example, in young infants, the amount of sleep that you'll see in 14 to 17 hours in an infant, and then 12 to 15 hours, these are huge amounts of sleep. And that's the brain maturing, getting larger, integrating all these processes. It takes a lot of sleep to actually keep that all on track. But even, if you look at, even for adults, we need, and this number is actually pretty well defined. There was a paper that came out about 3 months ago really looking at the amount of sleep that a human adult needs. It's 7.5 hours, and that's a pretty tight window. But if you look at large population studies across multiple studies, there's a meta-analysis that was done. It's 7.5 hours, and it's a pretty tight window. And making this. So again, this slide actually highlights just that it's important to have enough of all stages of sleep.
Clay?
Yep.
Going back to the previous one?
Yep.
It doesn't seem like teens, I don't know, that just doesn't seem true to my experience. Every teen I've ever had needs about 2 to 4 more hours of sleep.
So for teens, the teens' recommendations now are 8.5 to 9 hours.
Okay, but it looks like it's still going downward. To me, it seems like it goes up.
Yeah, to my eye, this looks like a fairly broad window, and it looks like they're kind of hedging a little bit. But basically, the windows, with the larger population studies now, it's become tighter. So for kids now, from like preteens, junior high, high school age, up to age 24, actually, it's 8.5 to 9 hours per night. Yeah, and it's up to age 24, so even though you're able to vote and join the military at age 18, your brain is not fully matured until you're 24. So anyway, and that's just all of the connections that are taking place here. Right. And again, this slide shows just the importance of just having both non-REM and REM sleep. The slides got buggered up here because of the transition we made. But anyway, so it's physical restoration, mental restoration. You actually have to have some of both to actually optimize the experience of really healthy sleep. All right. So fast facts on sleep deprivation, the key points that I want you to take home. So first point was that adults need 7.5, 8 hours of sleep on a nightly basis. Sleep deprivation begins with relatively little loss of sleep. So as little as 30 minutes off your target sleep time actually gets you into a sleep-deprived state, all right? Sleep deprivation is cumulative. It adds up over time, and I forgot to put the word hours there. It's a ceiling of 72 hours. So half hour tonight, half hour tomorrow night, half hour the next night, it adds up over time. Your brain does not forgive you in the morning. Fortunately for us, the cap on that is about 72 hours. So it's not this endless pit of sleep deprivation. It is defined, you can recover. The recovery time is 3 to 4 days. And that is from a practical sleep doctor viewpoint, there's no escaping that. It is not possible to catch up in less than 3 to 4 days. Not happening. Yeah.
That's why the college kids come home and they sleep for the first 4 days.
Yeah. So like that's the experience when you go on holiday, right? So you get on the plane in Fairbanks, midwinter, you go to Hawaii, you get off the plane, go to your resort, sun, sand, beach, waves, and you think, oh, this is really nice, I'm relaxing. And as the week goes on, you feel better. It's not the sun, sand, beach, and waves. It's actually you spending more time catching up on your sleep. And so that's the big...
The sun's nice too.
The sun is nice. It does help for lots of reasons. So that all is like a nice springboard to get into this conversation with respect to how to sleep better. And so a common question comes up like, so, what one thing can I do to actually make myself sleep better? And for me, this is like asking me, what is the best chess move to make? And so my answer is, well, it depends. And it's a nuanced question. And that is the point of this talk. I'm going to offer a couple of ideas, couple suggestions, but it's really up to you to kind of think about what applies for you and try to make that work for you. All right. So you can use the information we just discussed in terms of thinking about what we're going to talk about next. So the physiologic targets that you can use technology to actually influence your sleep are optimizing the sleep environment, optimizing the timing, the circadian timing of your sleep, and then also encouraging regular timing of the dominant sleep period in a 24-hour day. All right? Those are the targets. That is it. Everything else is magic. All right? And so then it would be placebo effect, and that's why it works, right? So this is the main areas when I think about using technology to improve sleep. This is what I think about. All right. Now, you can't, so there's obviously technological approaches to life, but there are things that, technology is not going to help us with. The top, and this, unfortunately, this didn't play out when we went from Keynote to PowerPoint. But the non-technologic things to really focus on, really restricting the time to bed to optimize the homeostatic sleep drive. So let's talk about that. So homeostatic sleep drive, there is a chemical in your brain that builds up during the day. So while we're all sitting here awake, our brains are generating this compound called adenosine. And as adenosine builds up over the day, builds up, it's like a teapot that overflows. And once you get to a certain level of adenosine in the brain, that triggers the sleep process so that you get tired enough to fall asleep. Now, you've experienced adenosine. So if you've been up all night flying on Alaska Airlines, adenosine is what gives you that sense of sleep pressure that you have to sleep. Like, I am getting so tired. I just got to go lay down somewhere. It's adenosine that's giving you that sense of sleep pressure. So if you go to bed at 5 o'clock in the evening and try to sleep, there's not enough sleep pressure built to get you down and keep you out. And so what'll happen is, you might be a good citizen, you might try to go to sleep early, and your sleep will be light, easily fragmented with lots of little awakenings, and you won't drop into a really deep sleep. So it's important to confine the bedtime, the time that you're in bed, really to the times that you're planning on sleeping. Hanging out, watching television, reading for long periods of time, it makes things difficult. Second thing is being sure that you're addressing any medical or psychological disorders that contribute to poor sleep. So there are a lot of medical disorders out there that actually impact how we sleep. No technology that I'm going to talk about this evening is going to help you with that. So if you have untreated sleep apnea, hypoxia because of bad lungs, bad heart, if you have pain, or if you've got uncontrolled depression or anxiety, technology is not going to get you there. Seeing somebody who's got some sense of how to address those problems and then integrate that into better sleep that's the direction you need to go. Avoiding sleep disruptive behaviors, so obviously staying up at night, watching Netflix, and then most importantly, engaging in sleep promoting behaviors like regular exercise. very tight connection between physical activity and the quality and depth of your sleep. The more you're active, the deeper, the more stage N3 or stage 3 sleep you're going to get. The more physically responsive the sleep is going to be for you. And there's no replacing that. And this is especially true for women. If you look at sleep quality in women as they age, there are a couple of studies that actually direct linear correlation. The more you exercise, the better the depth of your sleep. And this is especially true for women, regardless of age. All right. Avoiding napping or dozing during the day. Again, this comes back to that adenosine issue. If you take a nap during the day, you start burning off that adenosine. So when it comes to be bedtime, you have less adenosine to push you to sleep and keep you down. So typically, if you are going to nap, keep the nap 30 minutes or less and not after 3 p.m. Okay? Avoiding caffeine 6 to 8 hours prior to bedtime. Caffeine is, how we experience caffeine is different for each one of us, and that's genetic. I mean, like if somebody's brewing coffee in the room, I can't sleep. But my dad could drink like pots of coffee before bed and roll over and go right to sleep. So it's how we experience caffeine differently. But for most of us, caffeine does impair our ability to fall asleep to some degree. And so the general thought is to avoid 6 to 8 hours because it has such a long half-life. It hangs around a long time. And then avoiding alcohol 4 hours prior to bedtime. Alcohol will help you fall asleep, but it will seriously disrupt your sleep. Okay? So if you're not taking care of business by taking care of these things, no technology is going to touch what you're, it's just not going to work. All right? So, all right. So let's get into the nitty-gritty here. All right. So our brains, the way they've evolved over time, is our brains are basically habit-generating machines. All right? Your brain is basically looking for activities, thought processes, behaviors, and learning whatever that is to whatever the cue is, and then behavior, and then response. And it is this habit loop that's talked about. If you read a book called Atomic Habits, it's been on the bestseller list forever. They talk about the cue, routine, reward. This pattern actually is a real deal, and it plays out in the brain with respect to something called neuroplasticity. And this has to do with the brain's really unique ability to make new pathways and get rid of old ones. So what's working gets reinforced, and what's not working gets jettisoned. And so these are actually pictures of neurons actually undergoing the process of neuroplasticity. So presumably there's some behavior we want to change, we want to reinforce it. So you have the cue, and then there's the behavior, and the more this pathway gets developed, you can see that the connections are actually building, okay? So the same thing is true for sleep. Sleep is a behavior in large parts. And it's true, it's a neurophysiologic, neuroendocrine process. There's chemical and neurologic processes that are favoring sleep. But if your behavior does not reinforce what you want, you're not going to get what you want. So classic example is in our society. So during the work week, we're going to bed at 9, 10 o'clock, getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, off we go to work. But on weekends, it's time to let our hair down. So we stay up late till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning watching Netflix, and then sleep in till 11 o'clock. Your brain does not care what day it is. All it knows is that you're sleeping one way 5 days a week and differently 2 days a week. And it's that transition is challenging. So if you're up late Friday and Saturday night, and all of a sudden you want to go to work Monday morning and get some sleep, if you try to go to bed at 10 when you've been up till 2 or 3, your brain's not going to be able to make the leap. And you've not reinforced the behavior that you want. All right? So in terms of setting the stage, so first bit of technology I really, really like is setting the stage for a sleep behavior to help you get ready to fall asleep. A lot of us, we push, go all day and try to relax to fall asleep. Now, some of us are very successful at reading a nice book or listening to music or something like that, not engaging, not involving digital media, and we're able to relax enough to actually drift off to sleep. Some of us, though, are tightly wound, and it's hard to let go of what was going on earlier in the day. So one of the devices I really like a lot is called the Mri Headband. It actually is a biofeedback device, and it actually supports slowing of the brain waves. So it's like learning meditation. So basically it goes through your iPhone, you put your earbuds in, and if your brain is really, really active, it makes a very unpleasant sound. And usually it's like storm waves crashing, thunder, lightning. And then the more relaxed your brain gets, the more softer lapping of the waves, birds start singing, and so it reinforces a slowing of the brain, and it gives you really tangible feedback on what your brain is doing. This is a really great device for people that have a lot of trouble winding down, and I do like it. It's a little bit, so the new version 2 is like $200 on Amazon, but if you get on, you can also get version 1, which is equally nice, and it's about $100. And it does work very nicely. So if you're somebody who, in thinking about your sleep and trying to get to sleep and have trouble winding down, and you're doing all the right things, a Mri Headband is a nice little tool that you might consider thinking about. And this young lady is wearing one. And they're pretty neat, okay? In terms of also setting the stage for falling asleep, so again, you want to build sensory cues to reinforce the habit you're trying to get. So starting on the top left here, white noise machine, audiobooks, and the most recently binaural beats are an interesting idea. So this is all background noise meant to kind of relax you, kind of distract you a little bit. So audiobooks, so an audiobook is not a new book that you've never read before and you're not familiar with. The audiobooks that you want to listen to when you're trying to fall asleep is the same, some story that you really enjoy, and you want to just listen to it over and over. And so like in my case, I like the first book in the Harry Potter series, Sorcerer's Stone. Listen to it hundreds of times. But I put it on like 15, 20 minutes and I'm out. But I know the story, it's nothing unique, but it's pleasant to listen to, it's distracting enough that I can relax and fall asleep. Oh, I have listened to that, except I really like that. And so it's too engaging for me.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh no, yeah, this is off the British Isles?
Yes.
Yeah, there's actually an app that actually plays. Yeah, I've heard that. But anyway, so basically a white noise machine, audiobooks. The interesting one is binaural beats. So basically it's playing two very closely related frequencies in the brain, in the ears. And it sounded like hocus pocus to me when I first saw it, up until recently. And there was a study that came out where they looked at binaural beats and putting them on at nighttime as you're falling asleep and then staying asleep. And they actually showed that there was an increase in stage 3 sleep and there was a shorter sleep onset time using these two frequencies. So small studies, if you find listening to binaural beats interesting, you can get them on Apple easily. And they're actually kind of interesting to listen to, but that would be something else you could try. Low-level lighting, I like a lot. Also a visual cue to help you fall asleep. Using scents like lavender, and there was a study looking at sleep onset and using aromatherapy with lavender. One study that showed that there was some potential benefit. I think it's like if you like it and it helps you feel like it helps you fall asleep, then go for it. Weighted blankets are also nice for some people, not for others. Don't do the Triplehorn thing. So if one weighted blanket is one, it was nice, but more is always better. So I bought, I think it was like what, a 30-pound blanket. I could barely move. So we no longer have that blanket. But basically it's using your senses to kind of build these cues to set the behavior to get the response that you're looking for. And again, there's no magic. You're just building cues. Okay. The other thing I really like is I really like the apps that are out there for your iPhone and the Fitbits and the Apple Watch. I do find them helpful for 2 reasons, maybe 3 reasons. One is people are into it and they're really focused on their sleep. It's like weight loss apps or exercise apps. Like if I walk 4,000 steps a day, I've achieved something. So what I like about it is it brings focus to an area that people don't ordinarily focus on. And it gives you really tangible metrics. Like you only slept 5.5 hours last night and you're this much behind. and then it becomes a goal to achieve. And so I really like these apps. Yeah. My very favorite one, but I can't afford, is the Oura Ring. And it is awesome. It's version 3 out, version 2 or version 3 out now. And basically it's a biosensor here. And it does all sorts of metrics: body temperature, heart rate variability, breath rate, total sleep time, napping, estimates of non-REM and REM sleep, which are pretty close, continuity of sleep. It's a step counter, like how much walking you do every day, activity and inactivity and calories burned. And the other one I didn't add, I did add heart rate variability. So heart rate variability is pretty cool. It's very individual, so there's no perfect heart rate variability. And so for those of you who don't know, heart rate variability has to do with the difference in beat to beat variability. So from every heartbeat, it changes by microseconds, in terms of how on time it is. And the difference in heart rate variability will change from moment to moment. If you've got an abnormal heart rate variability, it can indicate you're stressed, or you're sleep deprived, or you're overtraining with exercise, or you're getting sick. And you can kind of use it as a tool. But I can't compare myself, say, to Mike in terms of my heart rate variability and what mine's doing. It's only relative to myself. So if the heart rate variability is changing for me over time, I can use that as a tool to help me know if I'm getting sick or overtrained.
Would that work for people who have AFib?
No. It may not track as nicely because these devices, the Apple Watch actually can tell the difference with atrial fibrillation. But I think that a number like the Fitbit, for example, it confuses the sensor and it actually reads a faster heart rate, but it doesn't tell you if you're in sinus rhythm or atrial or tachycardia. So what she's asking is, so there's heart rate, how fast, and then there's heart rhythm, like normal sinus rhythm versus atrial fibrillation. Atrial fibrillation is a very irregular, erratic heartbeat, and it beats. And so these devices can't always tell the difference. And so I think it may confuse it. But I really like the Oura Ring. So if you're looking for a Christmas gift. Yeah. So the apps have all sorts of really cool displays. Like you can look at, time sleeping, the amount of time, estimates with respect to non-REM or REM, different ways and really it's your preference, what you like. If you want to get the one that I like, it's Auto Sleep. This is an awesome app. And the reason is I like that it tells you how far behind you are. Because Auto Sleep, a lot of the other sleep, they don't really give you a sense. They tell you you're not getting enough sleep, but they don't give you a sense of where are you at in the 3 to 4 day catch-up window. And this app does a beautiful job. And it even comes with a little iWatch version of it. And I really like it a lot. So if you're looking for an app, this would be not a bad place to start. Okay. The other one I like, similar version called Pillow Sleep Tracker, also quite nice as well. It also tracks heart rate as well. This is a nice one I like. Next target we'll go for in terms of improving your sleep quality, it has to do with body temperature and sleep. And in terms of what you need to know for sleep is, so during the day, our body temperature gradually goes up and up and up as we're active and doing things. And then about 10 p.m. for those of us that are sleeping most nights, there's a drop in body temperature that occurs just as you're getting sleepy and ready to fall asleep. And in part, it's the drop in body temperature that actually triggers you to drop into sleep, all right? And then the body temperature drops as the night goes, just a little bit, 1 to 2 degrees Celsius. And then in the mornings, you're low, and then the body temperature starts to increase. And actually, it's this low that actually triggers the wake-up process as well. So body temperature is important while we sleep.
Would using a sauna help?
Oh, hang on to that thought. Yeah. So here it is. Here's a little nicer little metric. So, here's 5 p.m., 7 p.m., 9 p.m., dropping from 98.8 to 98.5. Now it's 10 o'clock, and now that temperature drops a little bit, triggers sleep, and then into a deep sleep, and then as the body temperature goes up about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, it starts to wake you up. So you can use body temperature. You can actually accentuate or augment this process for your benefit, okay? So with respect to falling asleep, if you accentuate the change in body temperature, so let's say, for example, I go to the hot springs, hang out in the hot springs for an hour, and then try to go to bed. When I get out of the hot springs, my body temperature cools very quickly, and that differential is what really pushes the ability to fall asleep. So I don't know if you've been there at the hot springs during the day. It's really great in the winter. So you go in the winter, you hot spring, you get out, you're driving home to Fairbanks in about 15 minutes from the hot springs, and you can see the skid marks on the road where people, yeah. So, but that's actually important. So it's that differential. So like tonight, when you get home, hot shower, then cool bed clothing, and then cool off the bedroom. And so you get that temperature differential, and that really pushes it, and it should help you fall asleep. Likewise, if you keep the bedroom cool at night, it actually accentuates stage 3 sleep, that physically refreshing sleep. You'll get more of it if the bedroom is cool. So these technologies actually push this idea. So my new favorite thing that I'm kind of playing with, I'm not a huge fan of sleep aids, to be honest. But a lot of patients have trouble falling asleep especially. And again, that rumination, that busy mind kind of thing that a lot of us experience when we're having trouble falling asleep, it turns out if you cool the brain a little bit or cool the head a little bit, it actually settles the brain down, less rumination, less busy mind, and it will help you fall asleep. So somebody came up with this idea called the Ebb Headband. And I was a little skeptical. I was at a sleep conference about 3 years ago, and I was a little skeptical that this is a thing. But it's a thing. And they have a couple studies, small clinical trials that actually show benefit in terms of patients with sleep onset insomnia. So trouble falling asleep, typically with a busy mind. Something like this might be something to try. And it's not a medication. It's pretty low risk. And this would be, I guess the other thing you could do is have a big bowl of ice cream before you go to bed and really get the ice cream headache going. But anyway, but this is kind of a cool idea, and I like it. Pardon the pun. But anyway, so another thing you can do is go bigger, not just a headband, but go for the whole bed. And this is the bed jet, and you can either cool or heat the bed, and you can drop the bed temperature if your partner is willing. And but this is, oh, they have two sides. So you can actually, yeah, his and her. Yeah, and so this is another way to think about the problem. Another really simple thing is just dropping the temperature completely in the whole bedroom and getting a swamp cooler. And that actually works pretty well. It's not as fancy, and the headband's much cooler looking, but this would be another way you could manage the temperature towards your benefit. All right. Last thing has to do with circadian timing in sleep. And this is a big issue for us in Alaska. So circadian timing. So the circadian timing of sleep has to do with the timing in a 24-hour cycle that you sleep best. Okay, so for myself, I'm a 9 to 4:30, 5 o'clock guy. So 9 p.m., 4:30, 5 o'clock. My wife, probably 11, 12, till 7, 8, 9, something like that. And so, but for each of us, it's different, and there's no normal. Everybody has their own time. It is genetically shared. So my dad, for example, also is an early evening person, and I think my mom is well. So it's that gene is passed on. Likewise, some of the kids are night owls, and will take on that. So there's this genetic predisposition. Okay. So having said that, so there's actually two things that come into play with our circadian timing of our sleep. The first process is this process S, which has to do with that adenosine level, that homeostatic sleep drive, where the adenosine builds up all day, and then it declines at nighttime once you're asleep, all right? If you think about it, if you just had the homeostatic sleep drive, this adenosine level driving your sleep, what would happen would be you would just progressively get more and more tired during the day, and usually by mid-afternoon, you wouldn't be able to help yourself. You'd be falling asleep all over the place, and which would be inconvenient. So to counter that, you actually have a circadian alerting system where where as the adenosine levels build and is pushing you more and more towards sleep, the circadian signal actually counters that and opposes the need to sleep. And then at the right time, 10, 11 o'clock for most people, the circadian system drops out, the adenosine homeostatic system takes hold, you fall asleep, and then you're off till morning, all right? Okay, and here's these adenosine levels we talked about. Okay? Yeah. So by the way, just out of interest, coffee is an adenosine blocker. So the way that adenosine promotes sleep. So if you block adenosine with a cup of coffee, that's what keeps you awake. So that's the adenosine levels. So again, this is our two-process model, the circadian timing. All right. So this circadian timing, this opposing of the homeostatic sleep drive, is a very, very cool process. So you, in fact, really do have a chemical clock in your brain that actually sets the timing of your sleep. And it's about the size of the tip of a pen. It's 80,000 neurons in size. And it literally acts like a chemical clock, like a sand timer. And that's how it works. And it's located right between your eyes right here. It's a little dot of 80,000 neurons. And it controls the timing of every cell, of every organ in your body. So that 80,000 neurons controls everything, all right? Now, if it were in isolation, you would just have this circadian timing that you inherited genetically, and your body would not be able to adapt. So say, for example, if you went to Fairbanks to New York, it would be very inconvenient to be sleeping Fairbanks time while you were visiting in New York. Likewise, if you came from New York to Fairbanks, not being able to adjust and adapt would be a problem. And so the way that your brain knows where you are is through your eyes. There's certain kind of receptors in the back of the retina that actually receive full spectrum light, or equally importantly, blue spectrum light, the 460 to 480 nanometer light. And it actually is the process by which that your brain resynchronizes every morning, okay? And the way that happens is it's the morning light that actually synchronizes the timing of your sleep, okay? And then it goes to the retina, and then the suprachiasmatic nucleus, that 80,000 neurons, connects to most organs, digestive system, liver, heart. All of this is controlled by that group of neurons. And again, this highlights the different kinds of circadian timing of sleep. So normal is like 10 till 6. I have an advanced sleep phase pattern, so I go to bed 8 or 9, up at 4 or 5, and then other people will go to bed later, 10, like 12, 1, 2, and then they'll get up at 11 or noon. So these are all different kinds of patterns. All right. So if you really wanted to know the circadian timing of your sleep, there is a wonderful app, and it just came out actually about 9 months ago. It's called Rise. And Rise is actually, it uses metrics from your watch, but also your iPhone. You don't have to have an iWatch or anything like it. It runs off, because most of us are so connected to our phones, your phone knows when you're awake, when you're asleep. And so it transmits all this to the Rise app. And so now it actually maps it onto a 24-hour schedule, and now you can know what your natural circadian timing of sleep is. So for example, if I were to be studying for board exams or getting ready for a talk, and I wanted what is my most efficient time for cognitive stuff, right? It's between 5 a.m. and 9 a.m. precisely. And that is what my life experience is. When I was in medical school, my best studying, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning till 9, 9:30, 10, I'm kind of done. And then my next sweet spot is mid-afternoon, and I couldn't study very well in the evening, so I typically didn't study. So I can use that, but you can use that for exercise. Like, when is the best time for you to exercise? Well, it depends on what you want to do. Do you want to exercise to lose weight or just get physically fit? If you want to lose weight, the best time to lose exercise is in the morning, and you can use this app to help you to decide when the best time for you to exercise is to lose weight. Or if you want to get fit, same thing. So you can use this very cool tool to actually connect with your own circadian rhythm. And if you do anything to change it, you can actually track how it moves. It's awesome. And it is, I really like this. And I really like it for teenagers and college students, because it really puts them in contact with what their bodies are trying to tell them, and it gives them something to work with. And I really, really like this app. All right. All right. So, so the way that the light exposure actually, it's through melatonin. So melatonin is the hormone of nighttime. That's the hormone that tells you when you are asleep. Okay. And so melatonin typically rises about 2 hours prior to bedtime. So it is now 8 o'clock. My melatonin levels have been rising for the past hour. And so probably about 9, I'll be starting getting sleepy. So it's about 2 hours before. If you expose yourself to full spectrum light as you walk out of the building this evening, or when you get home and you turn on Netflix and expose yourself to blue spectrum light, you just blocked melatonin very effectively, and you've pushed your bedtime later, okay? So it's pretty potent. So 7 minutes on your iPhone can keep you up 45 minutes longer than you expected. A half hour on your computer or half an hour on your television, and even if you're not even looking at it, if it's just on in the room, those receptors pick that up, and it blocks melatonin for about an hour to 2 hours for some people. It can be very dramatic, all right? Now the problem for us in Alaska, now that you know how circadian timing works, has to do with our light. So right now, here we are in, oh, this is almost right, June 26th. So we have all this light right now. So there's no clear day-night demarcation to actually tell us, when we should be sleeping, when we should be awake. So we get very confused, and what happens is our bedtimes go later and our wake-up times go later, and then usually about mid or late June, mid-July, we all become sleep deprived as a community. And so you'll see increased levels of irritability. People are, and you'll actually see it in domestic violence, or if you look at the police logs, there's actually more calls for police intervention for stuff. And I think that it has to do with, because this communal sleep deprivation happens. But likewise in winter, we don't have any morning light exposure. So the first morning light that you would get would be like 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. So you lack the morning light exposure that actually would set your circadian timing so that you could get up at a reasonable time. And because in the winter months, if you don't have morning light exposure, then you default to your genetics and whatever else is going on around you. And so, you could find yourself going to bed far later than you should be for work or school. All right, so this is kind of technology, I guess. So one thing you could do in the evening, so the take-home point is evening light, bad. So if you want to avoid light that actually impacts your sleep in the evening, like tonight when you walk out, or if you're going to be watching digital media within 2 hours of bedtime, I really like blue blocker glasses. And my favorite brand is the Spectra 479. And if you wear glasses, they have 479 over glasses that fit very nicely over your regular glasses, and it works beautifully. And you put them on about 2 hours prior to bedtime. So Spectra 479, they're on Amazon, they're 30 some bucks. Those are really nice. So this time of year, those are great. Or if in the winter months you're using a lot of digital media. All right? All right. So in the mornings, you really want to push the light exposure as much as possible. So a happy light for your desk, there's different kinds you can get, which is really nice. The other thing I really like is I like to pair a desk happy lamp. If you're working at your desk during the day, I like to pair it with a full spectrum alarm clock. So what you do is you set the full spectrum alarm clock to go off, and what happens is if I get up at 4:30 in the morning, what it'll do is it'll start to glow about 4 and brighter, 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 brighter. And then at 4:30, when it's maximum brightness, so that whole time I'm getting signals to my suprachiasmatic nucleus that's when I want to wake up, and it keeps my bedtime stable. And and then if I further that during the daytime, so when I get to work, put the happy light on, then I've got full spectrum light all morning. maintaining things. So my favorite brand of that is the Philips Wake Up Light. They run about 120 bucks on Amazon right now. And you want to remember that picture exactly, because there's a lot of cheap knockoffs, and that's really the one you want, okay? But those are really nice. Now, the problem with happy lights and full spectrum alarm clocks is they're not portable. And so if you're like me, like getting up in the morning and doing things, then it's inconvenient to be tied to a desk or something. So somebody's come up with full spectrum light goggles that you can use, and these are very cool in Europe. So these are very popular, and so this is the retimer, and then this is the name for this one is the Luminette, and both of these are equally good, really what you like, but these are nice because you can now get up in the morning, get light exposure, do the dishes, read your book, get on the computer, and you're portable. You can go, and these are really quite nice. All right. So in summary tonight, so there's a lot of technologies out there that are allegedly to help with sleep. But in my mind, the ones that make sense are the ones that actually impact our physiology directly. So circadian timing of sleep, helping us with our sleep behaviors, leveraging body temperature. Those are the technologies that actually make sense to me. That's how I'm using these in my clinics. Now, obviously, I do lots of other things. We sometimes use medications, sometimes we do sleep studies. So there's a lot more to my life than just this. But in terms of technologies and using these to actually help yourself, this is not a bad way to go. Okay? Now, if you wanted to read more on this or watch more on this, there is an awesome author, Matthew Walker. He wrote a book called Why We Sleep. It is a wonderful read or a wonderful audiobook. He's got a very cool Australian accent, so this makes for a perfect something to listen to while you drive. His TED, if you don't have time to read the book or listen to it, his TED Talks, 15 minutes of your time, he imparts a lot of the stuff that's in the book, and he's a brilliant author. And his ability to tie physiology, human behavior, current sleep science into everyday life, he's really gifted. And he's a pleasure to listen to, and it's very interesting. So this would be a resource. This is where I would go to next. And with that, we'll end the talk right on time. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm one of those people that gets up at like 5 in the morning and gets on the treadmill and all this other stuff. Would I be better off sleeping that hour? Is that a yes or no question?
So it's a depend. This is a chess question.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but let's get there because that. So how do you decide if you're getting enough sleep and how are you doing? So I use the daytime experience. So we know from human longevity and health studies that the optimal time for the bulk of us in this room, it's 7.5 hours a night. So that's just the hard facts, the hard numbers. So if you're getting close to that and you wake up in the morning, you're feeling pretty rested and refreshed during the daytime, not really struggling with daytime fatigue or daytime sleepiness, I would say stick with what you're doing. Yeah, that's what I would say. But I don't just focus on the time, it's your experience. Like, are you feeling rested during the day? Yeah. Yeah, oh, go ahead.
You mentioned about the full spectrum light. So I was wondering about how long we should actually use that.
Yeah, so that's so the question is, so how long should you use full spectrum lighting? So minimum, I would say like 30 minutes. But I'm a practical guy, so some is better than none. And so even if you use the Philips wake up light in the morning for the 15, 20 minutes that you're waking up, that's going to be better in the winter months for you in terms of stabilizing the timing of your sleep, and then no light at all. So in 10,000 lux is the intensity of light that you're looking for. Yeah. Is that? Yeah. Yep.
How much of this has to do with industrialization and electrification and things like that? I lived on the equator where we didn't have those things.
Yeah.
And, my neighbors and myself, we found it was very quiet by 8 o'clock. And on the equator, the sun doesn't vary by 5 or 10 minutes throughout the whole year.
And if you pair that idea with the idea that what I was alluding to earlier in the beginning of the talk with respect to evolution. For almost a million years, our species and progenitors were sleeping on the savanna without, artificial lighting and on all the societal pressures that we have. So the bulk of pre-human and human history, which has driven the evolution of the brain that we're carrying around in our skull, is towards what you're suggesting. So and experientially, I think that there's, what's the name of the book, Mike? Acceleration of our...
Resonances is the next one. I can't.
Yeah. So it's the idea of our accelerating society and lifetime and our lifestyles. It's not. It can't. It's. Just a lot of the societal stuff we're seeing right now is a result of this constant faster, produce more, and it's this acceleration of society, and we are very close, if we're not already past our capacity as a human species, and it is impacting our physiology. And so there's a lot of us that would say that the experience of slowing down, being really intentional about what you're doing with your time and your day, it's just not possible to do the Wall Street life thing. And there's definitely, so I think it's a huge part of what's the problem.
Are there two differences depending upon where you live on the globe, though?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Where we live here, I'm on a roller coaster.
Yeah.
I can sleep 12, 14 hours in the winter some days.
Yeah. And part of that's you're being bullied around by the midnight sun, because every day, the light's either you're gaining more or losing, and if it's the morning light that sets your schedule, then you're at the mercy of what's happening at this latitude. And so yes, there are differences. Yeah.
If you're awakened, let's say, in Preem 3 for a bathroom break, where do you resume? Do you start from the beginning?
Start stage 1. Yes. Yeah, absolutely, yes.
So, going back to those sleep stages, there's awake periods there. Do they count as part of your sleep?
No, when we read sleep studies, we actually call them, it's WASO, wake after sleep onset, WASO. So a normal amount of wake after sleep onset is 30 minutes for most. So I usually like 30, 40 minutes is kind of my mental limit when I'm talking to patients, like in terms of what's abnormal. So as you have experienced sleep, you're aware of waking up periodically during the night. And so, yeah, so 30, 40 minutes, yeah. Or
this app here says that I wake up a number of times during the night without knowing it.
Yeah.
And it tells me that it subtracts it from my sleep.
Yes. So there's two issues there. One is a perceptual limitation. So our experience of sleep and experience of reality shifts greatly when we're either very sleep deprived or we're awakened from sleep. So if you're awakened from night and there's a car crash and you look out the window and you see it happen, you hear the initial crash and you see stuff flying around, if you were to measure time and the sequence of events, your ability to correctly recall the events if you were awakened from sleep is an error. So likewise, if you're awakened at night, you may or may not realize how long or short you're awake, or even that you awakened at all. Like when I was a resident, I got a phone call at night from the nurses, and they would ask a question, and I presumably would give an order, and they would say the next morning, "Oh, that worked." And I'm like, "What worked?" And you wouldn't, yeah, it is, because, and so that happens. So, but likewise, also the technologies. So the technologies for the Apple Watch, so I like, with the exception of the Oura Ring, I like the boundaries, like the beginning and the end of the night. Like, that's when you're sleeping. But the stuff that happens in the middle, it's kind of conjecture. It's not really that secure. But I think it won't be long before you get to the technology where it will correctly identify wakefulness during at nighttime. I don't think we're there yet. We're close. Now the Oura Ring, for sure, because that measures like a lot of other things as well. Yeah.
I was just was going to say, since waking is part of the sleep cycle,
Yeah.
do you count that in your 7.5 hours of sleep?
Yeah, I count it. It's counted. Yeah. So we assume that there's a 30-minute period of wakefulness in aggregate during the night.
Is there a linkage between seasonal affective disorder and sleep problems?
Absolutely. So, and part of it may be so as you know, some morning light exposure is one of the things that we sometimes will recommend to patients who have seasonal affective disorder. So there's the nuclei that control our sleep and the nuclei that control our mood they're next door neighbors, and they are connected. And so if you're sleep deprived, that can seriously drive seasonal affective disorder.
Which is why, like, come along about September, October, you start feeling the effects.
Yep, so you'd be a person that I would be thinking a lot about how I could engage light a little more effectively. So maybe those retimer goggles, or, because, who wants to sit at a table for an hour? You got stuff to do. So this way you could put it on and you could go about your day. I probably wouldn't go out in public, because you'd look a little odd, but at home it's all fine. But that would be, so there is a very tight connection, and also for anxiety, not just depression.
Does our smoky air have any impact on sleep?
Yes, it's hotter, so that it's, this time of year is warmer. The second thing is that it irritates the upper respiratory tract. So anything that irritates the respiratory tract, think about the last time you had cold or had allergies. How did you sleep then? So anything that irritates the upper airway, or if you've got an underlying lung condition and it's compromising that further, it's going to make your sleep worse. Yeah. And behind you, one question.
If you are somebody that occasionally goes through spurts where you fall asleep quickly and you sleep for about 3 hours and then you wake up and you can't go back to sleep, and so you get up and you move around for 2 or 3 hours and then you go back to sleep.
Yep.
And you eventually get 8 hours of sleep, but it may take you 12 hours to do that.
Yeah.
Is that, are you likely to suffer from sleep deprivation because of the broken time, or as long as you've got 2 big chunks that add up to?
Yeah. So you introduced an interesting idea, and it's so the answer is, I'm going to go back to my earlier comment. So there is a phenotype or a group of sleepers that have what we call biphasic sleep. So these are people that go to bed at 9, 10 o'clock, and they're up at 2 o'clock, and they'll read for a couple hours, and then they'll go back to sleep and sleep till 7 or 8. Okay? So it's 2 clusters of sleep. Those are biphasic sleepers. So famous people like Ben Franklin, Thomas Edison, Don Triplehorn, were all biphasic sleepers. And so they would, in aggregate, set 7.5 hours of sleep, and typically they wouldn't be sleepy during the day. And so really one of the metrics you want to look for is, are you waking up for the bulk of the day feeling pretty rested and refreshed, and are you finding that you're drowsy or sleepy? If you're sleeping by having a biphasic sleep and you're feeling pretty good during the day and it doesn't bother you, I wouldn't necessarily worry about it, okay? Because it may be normal. So for getting back to so if you look at some indigenous populations, there are some indigenous populations that are biphasic sleepers. And what they have reports where these people, they'll fall asleep 8 or 9 o'clock around the campfire, and then at 2 o'clock in the morning, they'll get up, maybe do a light project, maybe make a new arrowhead or something, and then they'll drift off to sleep. And that's a natural pattern for that group of people. So it may be that there are some people that are biphasic sleeper. Now, it could be pathologic as well. And again, the defining feature is if you're having daytime fatigue and not feeling rested during the day, and where the early morning awakenings you either have developed that as a pattern, and it's a dysfunctional pattern, or there's something disrupting your sleep apnea, pain, low oxygen levels. There's maybe something driving that. So really, so this is a chessboard question. So it could be, I'm not sure what the best move. There's more more data I would need to help somebody think about that. So it could be either way. But the biphasic sleeping is an interesting phenotype issue. Yeah. So yeah.
What are your thoughts on if you take a breathing mouth taping at night?
Oh, okay. So the question has to do with about mouth taping and sleep disorder breathing at night. All right. So to set the stage to answer that question for the group, so mammals typically have an airway that has a larynx, which is your voice box, and a pharynx, your mouth. Okay. And for most mammals, the larynx is really high in the neck. All right. So your moose, your deer, your dog, your weasel, all of those, it's really close. So the larynx provides support to the airway and keeps it from collapsing, okay? So in humans, we've evolved the ability to speak. But in order to speak and get the intonation that we have as humans, the larynx is lower in the neck. So we've evolved with a low-lying larynx relative to other mammals, which is great because we can talk and sing and do things like that. But the cost is that we leave the upper airway, the distance between the larynx and the pharynx, it leaves it exposed so that the airway can collapse. And so what can happen is if you're built right, a long palate, tongue that's backward displaced, and that airway can collapse and block off, and that can give you a condition called sleep apnea. All right. So the goal of treating sleep disorder breathing is keeping that airway open. So one way to potentially do that is by changing the direction of airflow through the mouth and nose. And it's so some people will tape the lips. And you can buy mouth tape for taping your lips. And there are some people that may actually help with the physics of airflow, may help support that airway and keep it open. And you could potentially treat mild sleep disorder breathing with mouth taping. The issue is, for me, when I think about it in terms of as a sleep doctor, is 60% of my patients with moderate to severe sleep apnea are overweight, and that is a significant contributing factor to their development of sleep apnea, both in terms of the amount of fat that's narrowing the sleep airway down, but also being overweight actually changes how the body manages the airway as you sleep. So if you're overweight, normally the body, normally when you're sleeping, the airway will be held open by reflexes that will reflexly keep the airway open. The reflex that keeps your airway open is impaired if you're overweight. So it's not just a mechanical narrowing of the airway, it's actually impairment of the neurologic function of the muscles that control the airway with people that are overweight. So my limited experience with mouth taping is that it doesn't necessarily cover patients with moderate to severe sleep apnea. So my preference is, and I work closely with a couple dentists that do use mouth taping, and I don't disapprove. What I would be cautious of is knowing where you're at on the spectrum of sleep disorder breathing. If you've got a young person, mild, snoring, maybe not feeling rested consistently, no health risk problems, no heart disease, no high blood pressure, other things like that, then trying mouth taping probably would be a very cost-effective approach. But if you've got somebody who's getting older, who's got significant daytime symptoms, or if they have underlying comorbidities, so heart disease, high blood pressure, I would be concerned that we might be leaving that person at risk if we're just taping their mouth and not supporting the airway. So I usually encourage the dentist that at least call me and we discuss it, or do a sleep study so we know where we are on the spectrum of things, so we're not missing somebody that actually has severe sleep apnea that really should be treated more aggressively. And the other issue is age-related. So one of the metrics we use for determining how successful mouth taping and oral appliances work is the severity of snoring, which is fine when you're young. But when you get older, the intensity by which we take a breath at night changes. We actually breathe more shallowly at nighttime. So in order to generate a loud snore, that actually takes some work, right? And if you're a person, as you get older, if your effort to breathe declines, the snoring's going to get softer, and you might be fooled into thinking, oh, my sleep apnea is getting better, and it's not a problem, and you could be fooled. And I worked, last year I spoke with Dr. McCulley, last year I think, and he does memory evaluations for patients with looking at Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. And so he sends a lot of referrals to us for sleep evaluations, and it's amazing to me the number of people who are coming to me for memory-related issues, minimal to no snoring, and they have really significant sleep apnea. Sleep apnea that would double or triple their risk for heart disease, dementia, or stroke. And so it's just keeping it all in mind. Yeah. So that's a long answer.
Maybe 2 last questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. On climate change, it's hot and getting hotter and going to get hotter, and many people can't cool themselves off in the world. What do you do when it's hot? How does it affect your sleep? How do you sleep when you can't cool down?
It's going to be really difficult. So that's, for example, you have the same experience if you have a febrile illness. So if you have the flu, and so one of the things that keeps you awake when you have a fever is your core body temperature is elevated internally, right? But in this case, you're talking about an external way to increase your core body temperature. So unless you can get that, certainly get the drop, the 1 Celsius degree drop in the evening, you're going to have trouble falling asleep. And if you have trouble cooling the body at night, you are going to have trouble staying asleep. So your only choice is externally cooling the body. So, and typically that's evaporative. So taking a shower at night and you know, as cool as you can, and trying to push the system a little bit. That's about the best. Or, you know, trying some of the things we talked about.
I guess we need swamp coolers for the folks that can't do that.
Yeah.
How does my phone know that I'm asleep?
How does your phone at your sleep? Excellent question. So all Apple Watches, iPhones, Fitbits, in there they have an accelerometer, so it measures motion. And these accelerometers so it's measuring motion all the time. And then, so what they have is algorithms that the computers know, like, so if somebody's awake, going about their day, this is what the motion looks like. If someone's sleeping, this is what a typical human pattern would look like. And so they've, you know, when they've looked at these, like, you know, they can actually tell with a reasonable degree of accuracy the difference between a awake human being going about their day versus somebody who's sleeping. The patterns of motion are very different. And it's not subtle stuff. It can be very subtle. Like the phone can know if you're just, you know, or your watch will know if you're just laying there awake watching Netflix. It knows that it knows you're awake as opposed to sleeping. Yeah.
And one last question. One more big hand for Dr. Clay.
Thanks. Yay. Thank you.